Welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much for calling in today to VolunteerMatch's Best Practice Network webinar series. This is an extra special webinar for us today. As many of you know, we have a very robust learning center on our public website, all for nonprofits. But this is sort of a special edition series that we usually do for companies, but today that we're extending to our nonprofit community. We're so excited to offer this in addition to all the webinars that we already have. And we're really excited to see how many of you called in today. It should be a really great session. I'm equally excited to be welcoming Jocelyn Daw to the session today. Jocelyn is the co-author of the book Breakthrough Nonprofit Branding, 7 Principles to Power Extraordinary Results. She brings nearly 25 years of experience into the nonprofit sector to the conversation today, and she's recognized as a pioneer in the evolution between the relationships between businesses and community partnerships. Today she'll be covering the basics of nonprofit branding, teaching us ways in which a well-built nonprofit brand can help us engage our supporters, engage our volunteers, while also promoting each of our unique causes. Hold on one moment, please. Before we get started today, I just wanted to remind everybody of a couple of points. Again, hold on, we have somebody going by outside, but sorry for the noise. So today you can submit questions for Jocelyn by typing your questions into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can also, if you're participating via Twitter, you can also submit questions to our Twitter handle, VM_solutions, using the hashtag VMBPN, and that stands for Volunteer Match Best Practice Network. We're going to pose all of the questions today at the end of the session, so please submit them throughout, and we'll answer as many of those as we possibly can at the end of Jocelyn's presentation. And then just a reminder to everyone on the line, we will be distributing a copy of the slides and also the recording of this session to everyone who registered after the event. So no worries, you will get copies of the slides and the recording. So without further delay, I'm going to actually turn the session over to Jocelyn to get us started. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Casey, and it really is a great pleasure for me to be part of the Volunteer Match webinar series, and thank you very much for inviting me. I wanted today to really talk about the role of volunteers and brand and building a strong brand to really attract the strongest volunteers and retain the strongest volunteers. And as many of you know who work in the nonprofit sector, the roles that nonprofits are playing today is absolutely vital. And over the last decade or more, it has actually grown in importance, and the impact of the work that nonprofits are doing can really be seen everywhere. And without a doubt, volunteers are absolutely central to the success of any nonprofit organization. However, as nonprofits, we are working in a much more complex and crowded and frankly highly competitive marketplace. We're competing for resources, including those really important volunteers. And for many volunteers, because there's such a large number of nonprofits and a 35% increase in the number of nonprofits in this decade alone, it's often confusing for them to really understand the difference between organizations and how they can play a role. So in this really competitive marketplace, how does your organization stand out so that you can attract and retain volunteers? How do you really demonstrate and communicate your unique and relevant value? And how do you build those deep relationships with volunteers that encourage engagement, strengthen your work, and really increase your social impact? Because in today's world, doing good is no longer good enough. It's really important to have a clear and crisp brand so that volunteers can understand who you are, what you stand for, and the role they can play in making a difference. So the next slide, Casey.
Jocelyn, go ahead and try to advance the slide because I should have given you mouse control.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, here we go. Thanks. So today what I want to do is really four things. I want to give you the latest thinking in nonprofit and nonprofit branding and how nonprofit organizations are really using their brand to innovate their work and to really powering extraordinary results. And this information is going to be based on a book that I just recently published that Casey mentioned earlier. Then what I want to really do is bring it home and look at how branding is so central to attracting and retaining volunteers, and really specifically look at your organization and what you need to do in order to attract and retain those really important volunteers. Because what you really want to do is look at how you build your brand so that it serves as a way to differentiate, as a way to make that personal connection to those volunteers, to what they care about and what they believe in, so that what you're doing is creating an army of volunteers who really are connected to your organization in a way that really makes it feel like it's their own, because it really is. We'll go to the next slide. So today's presentation is really based on a 2.5-year research and writing project that resulted in the book Breakthrough Nonprofit Branding that was published through the Association of Fundraising Professionals and John Wiley series. So our goal in writing the book was really to provide nonprofits a way to really look at how could they increase their effectiveness, stand out, grow their community of supporters and volunteers, and in the end make a really big difference. And so our goal in writing the book was to really try to present some new thinking and new ideas around the whole role of brand, and then to provide you with a practical, tangible set of principles and a framework to really help you achieve breakthrough results and impact. And how we went about doing this book was really through very extensive research. We worked with the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the American Marketing Association, and Imagine Canada to survey their 40,000 collective members about their attitudes to branding, their challenges. And then what we did was we asked them to present organizations, nonprofits in their community that they really felt were standout examples. And then what we did was we took that and we narrowed it down and really used 11 case studies, the ones that you see in front of you. And we interviewed them, we studied them, we visited them. We had over 100 hours of interviews, 1,200 pages of transcribed interviews, and hundreds of pounds of documents. And what we really wanted to do was find a range of nonprofits, Canadian, American, local, regional, national, international, organizations that were over 100 years to ones that were just recently founded. And we also truly wanted to try to have a range of sizes of organizations. So when we interviewed, we have ones that were $300,000 in revenue, right up to Goodwill Industries, which is a $3.1 billion organization. And then again, to have a range of types of organizations working in different fields, health, education, arts, environment, because we wanted everybody to see themselves in this work that we did. We want people to understand that brand is not something that is only available to big organizations. Even small organizations can effectively think about, rebuild their brands, and really use it to power extraordinary results. And we really wanted to use these to tell the stories and to really bring it to life. So today in my presentation, I'm going to talk broadly about branding and then really bring it to life by talking specifically about our case studies. So often when I go out and do these presentations, one of the questions that I regularly get asked is, if there's one thing that you would say is the most important thing to think about, what would that be? And I would say it is, number one, the power of focus, of really being clear about what you stand for that is relevant to your core stakeholders, that differentiates you, that demonstrates your value. And certainly all of our nonprofit organization case studies really had mission statements, but more importantly, they were focused on achieving something really powerful, and they had more than just a mission statement. They were truly on a mission to make a difference. So I want to start off by getting everyone on the same page about what a brand is, because the way we're talking about brand in this book and the way I'm presenting it today is that it is so much more than just your name or your tagline or a set of communications tools, which is in many cases the traditional way that nonprofits think about branding. And really talk about brand is the perceptions that people have about your organization when they think about you. And those perceptions are formed based on the way you communicate, the way you act, and the way you interact. It's also what people will say about you, how they feel, and when they think about you, when they think about your organization. So it is truly so much more than just a logo and communications. It's really that harmonization of your mission, your vision, your values, your history, your purpose. And it's really an important way to help consumers and donors and potential volunteers to really understand who you are. And that really then helps to drive their choices as to who they support and who they engage with. So why is brand important? Why should nonprofits care about it? Well, all the research really points that, in fact, for most nonprofit organizations, 50% or more of their value, their assets, are really based on their brand. And Fast Company often talks about brands that engage and involve people the way nonprofits do and can really, truly make that emotional connection and that values alignment actually will have 20 to 200% higher results than their competitors and really help, especially from a nonprofit point of view, help you stand out as a charity of choice. And Jim Collins, in his wonderful little book, Good to Great for the Social Sector, talks about the fact that, in fact, brand is more important in the nonprofit sector than even the for-profit world. Because at the end of the day, when somebody contributes their time or they contribute money to support your organization, all they get in return is the knowledge that what they're doing when they provide support is they're making a difference on a specific item, a specific issue. And so it's so important for it to be very, very clear what that issue is, what you stand for, is really vital. And again, in today's complex, competitive, and crowded marketplace, brand is truly the new nonprofit imperative. And it is so important for nonprofits to strategically think about and really think about how they want to build and define their brand. Just go to the next slide. Here we go. And a lot of nonprofits are looking to the corporate sector and recognizing that they can learn a lot from the corporate sector. And I think this is always such a wonderful way to kind of demonstrate what I mean by brand. Because if you take a look on the left-hand side and those wonderful iconic ads from Apple, where they really position what a PC is and they position what a Mac is. So even though both of those companies essentially have computers, sell computers and computer products, obviously Apple's gone deeper than that, it clearly gives people a totally different sense about who that company is, what they stand for, what the value is that they bring, what the values they are. And it also, in terms of for people who are consumers, or in our case, volunteers or donors, it also helps them better understand what they value, who they are, what they stand for, and then aligning themselves with an organization, or in this case, a company that reflects those values. And certainly on the right-hand side with coffees, when you look at Starbucks, the $5 coffee, or Dunkin' Donuts, the $1 coffee, they both serve coffee, but they are positioning themselves in a completely different way. Starbucks is all about going in and having that experience. And so people who want to go in, and of course one of the things that Starbucks is trying to do is position themselves as the third place, the place where people can go that's beyond their home, beyond work. It's really like a community center. Dunkin' Donuts is the place you go in. It's the working man's coffee. You can grab a quick coffee and get out quickly. So they have really demonstrated who they are and how they are different from their competitors who are offering exactly the same type of product. I think I'm moving to the next slide. It's a bit slow, so my apologies. Here we go. So a brand is really about what you stand for, who you are, and what you stand for. It's then that really strong focus. It's the leadership position. It's what you do better than anyone else. And it really helps you to differentiate, to stand out, and we're really hardwired to see something that's different and helps you to stand out, and then really helps to build that emotional and personal connection that really then connects people around a community of like-minded people. It's that personal connection, it's the emotional, it's that values alignment, so that when people see your organization, they understand what they're getting and how it relates to them. And the fact of the matter is every organization has a brand. And one of the things is that a lot of organizations don't think about themselves as having a brand. And it's so important to think about that because the brand really provides that overarching story, that focus that really connects everything and provides that cohesion and clarity inside as well as outside, and we'll talk a bit about that. And so more and more nonprofits are recognizing they need to strategically think about what their brand is, what their brand value proposition is, and then to truly manage it and really use it to try to help build and drive volunteer engagement. So today what I want to do is talk about, now you know what a brand is, how do you really take your brand and build a roadmap so that you can really successfully build and implement a strategic and breakthrough brand. So in the book we talk about 7 principles, and I'm not going to go through every one. I want to focus in on the ones that are going to be most important in terms of the work that you're doing in terms of trying to engage more volunteers. And a brand is truly built from the inside out, and it starts with really discovering what your authentic brand meaning is. Who are you? What do you stand for? What makes you unique and different? What is your leadership position? And really standing for something that people can understand and then really use it to rally around, both inside the organization and outside. And then how do you connect people to it and use it in a way to communicate and demonstrate your value? So it is such an important process, and so often nonprofits, when they do brand exercises, they spend the time thinking about what makes them different. They launch the brand internally, and then the next day it's business as usual. And really you have to use your brand as that filter, the way to really determine what you do, what you won't do, how you act, how you communicate, and how you interact with your key community. So what I want to do now is bring this to life by giving an example of one of our nonprofit organizations. I'm just trying to advance the slide. Here we go. And what I want to do is talk about UNICEF, the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. And I want to start off by telling you a story about the journey of I think one of the great iconic brands, nonprofit brands globally. And I'm sure there isn't a person on the line that hasn't heard about UNICEF or had some connection with UNICEF. And the story starts back in 2002 when UNICEF was thinking about their upcoming 60th anniversary of operations and looking at their messaging and trying to figure out how they could elevate their communications and generate more revenue for their support for the good work they were doing. And they had a new chief marketing officer who often it takes fresh eyes to really get a sense of what needs to be done. And what he did was he started by talking to everyone inside the organization, talking to staff and volunteers, and he asked them to describe UNICEF and how it was making a difference and what it stood for and what made it different than all the other organizations. And as he was talking to a lot of these people, a lot of people talked about programs, the iconic programs, some of the celebrities, and certainly lots of discussion about things like the Trick or Treat or the UNICEF cards and some of their corporate partners. But when he finished talking to 20 people, he had 20 different stories. There was no unifying message or story that could really explain what the value and the relevance of UNICEF was. And truly, if inside your organization you can't explain who you are and what you stand for, how can you expect people on the outside to understand? And how do you have that overarching story that goes beyond just the good things that you're doing and clearly defines your purpose, your focus, and really talks about something beyond just your activities and really talks about the value and the benefits that you are bringing to the community? And rather than being defined by programs, as so often is the case by nonprofits, it's really how do you define those, define the benefits and what those programs actually deliver. So as he continued his research and realized they really needed to rethink their brand, he also started to do some external research and brought together a group of some of their donors. And of course, when you look, and again, this is what we're all experiencing in the nonprofit sector, this increase in the number of good organizations doing really important work, but often, again, this clutteredness makes it very difficult for people who don't live in the organization really understand how one is different than the other. And certainly when UNICEF was set up in the mid-1940s, there were probably half as many international organizations as there are today. And so when he showed this to some of their donors and asked them to explain how UNICEF was different than these other organizations, there was a lot of silence. They could not really define what the modern-day UNICEF brand was, who it served, what it stood for, that big idea that's bigger than the programs, and what it was doing that was really making a difference, even though they were doing great work. And so when UNICEF understood that they really needed to rethink their brand and who they were and what they stood for, so they could more clearly explain that to their donors and inside the organization as well as outside, they really spent a lot of time going back and looking at their DNA and their mission and their history and their years of operation to really discover and define their unique brand value proposition, what they did better than anyone else, what the value was that they were bringing to the table. And as they did this, almost 2 years of research, and I do want to say you don't have to take this amount of time, but this was such new thinking that it really took a lot of push, and I'm going to talk a bit about how, especially in the early days of brand work for nonprofits, it was very challenging for many people to understand why this was important. And as they did this work, what they really recognized that they were truly the undisputable leader and expert on childhood survival. They had saved more children's lives either working on their own or working with others than any other organization working in the international realm. And so what they wanted to do was say that they really wanted to build a global childhood survival movement and do something that was really important, many for the things you're thinking about today in terms of volunteering. And they had over the years really moved away from volunteer engagement, and they wanted to try to invite people back in and take it from sort of basic awareness to a deeper understanding and engagement that really was more resonant with the times and provided that overarching story that could really identify and help the organization move forward. So they really realized that what they were able to do was they had saved more children's lives, and this became such a focus and a driver for everything that they did as the filter for deciding their programs and how they communicated. And what was remarkable about what UNICEF did was they went beyond just thinking about the fact that they had saved more children's lives. They looked at their research and realized that in 2002, 2003, that there were about 25,000 children a day that were dying needlessly through lack of clean water, through lack of immunization, all the things that UNICEF were doing with their program. And what they came up with this idea of trying to invite people back in and get them to be part of a movement that was getting to zero. So moving from trying to be about getting a donation or volunteering to really inviting people to be part of doing whatever it took to save the life of a child. From really being a donor or volunteer to being part of a community, to join a movement. And from moving just an emotional reaction of showing children dying to really this whole idea of being around a shared value. If you believe that children should not die needlessly, UNICEF is the organization that is the leader and can really make a difference in this area. So they had a clear purpose, a clear meaning, a clear focus on benefits and the value that they were bringing. So how do you take a look at what they did? And when we were doing the research on this, we really looked at how can we help any organization understand what UNICEF did, how can you do that? And so we really focused in on this whole three-dimensional brand value proposition. So when you're doing the research and looking at your leadership position, it really does start with thinking about your organization, convincing the head, that rational consideration of what your organization does better than anyone else, that powerful idea that really sets it apart and obviously relates to your mission and is relevant to your key stakeholders. And then a breakthrough organization builds it up and goes beyond the organization and focuses on making that personal and emotional and values-based connection that's really around serving a higher purpose and a cause that is so much bigger than the organization. And when I speak, I often say to people, nobody cares about your organization. What they care about is what you're doing and how you're making a difference and how they can be involved. And that's the third part of the brand value proposition, is engaging the hands. How do you then invite people to join and be part of your community? So how do you take that sort of commitment that UNICEF has talked about in terms of getting to zero, so that when people engage with, whether they're volunteers, whether they're donors, how can they know that they're going to be part of a community of people who are going to be making a difference? So when you differentiate yourself in each one of those three brand value areas of the head, the heart, and the hand, you can really start to build a breakthrough organization. And I'm sorry, this is a little slow. Here we go. So it's the power of research, and it starts with doing that discovery research and taking those insights and then turning them into action, taking the time to really discover and articulate what your leadership position is, then elevating that and communicating it so that it's really about that higher purpose and the outcomes, and then really using it to unify and drive your strategy. Brand is not strategy itself. It should drive your strategy. This is who we are. This is how we want to position ourselves. This is our promise to the people who engage. And so now what we need to do is bring that to life through everything that we say and what we do and how we move forward. And then use it to really rally a community, get volunteers to understand when they are involved with your organization, this is what they're doing. And not only does it excite them, it makes it easier for them to explain and feel part of the bigger picture and be able to explain what they're doing and how they are contributing to making a difference. And that is a very, very powerful thing when people understand the purpose and meaning and how they're working to make a difference. So if we take a look at this and break it down again, we really look at the number one thing to do is really to put your constituent at the heart of your brand and really understand what you're doing better than anyone else that truly delivers value and makes a difference to the people who are supporting you. And then elevating it to that higher cause with tangible outcomes, and then truly using it to rally an internal as well as an external community based on shared values, shared commitments, what people care about, what they believe in. And I know that often when I talk, people look at me and they say, well, that's awesome. You're talking about UNICEF, which is a really big international organization. And I'm struggling here to get to the next slide here, so just my apologies. I don't know. Here we go. I wanted to bring forward one of the smaller organizations we looked at, which is an organization founded in 2002 as Admission Control. And it started when we interviewed them. They were about a $600,000 organization. And when they started in 2002, they really had a very clear mission, but they really hadn't given much thought to their brand. And the founder, Lisa Fielder, who's the executive director as well, was saying to me, you know, I just really didn't understand what brand was. I thought it was our logo. I didn't understand it really was about what our value proposition was, what we were truly trying to do. And when we started to have some success and wanting to grow, we realized that the way we were presenting ourselves and positioning ourselves was not clear. And even internally, again, people inside the organization, even when they had a clear mission, could not explain what their value was and what they were really shooting to achieve. And there was a lot of nervousness because, as any nonprofit knows, it's a challenge when you've got a brand and you're thinking about spending money and you think, is it worth the value? And Lisa said to me, I think back and I laugh when I think about how we stumbled over that, and yet how important our rebrand has really been for the organization. So what they did was they did something a lot less formal, I would say, than UNICEF in large measure, of course, because they're a smaller, newer organization. And they really sat down, and it gave them a chance to deeply think about their organization. What was the value they were really providing? What was it that they were doing that was really unique and really was a leadership position, and how were they making a difference in the community? And what was so wonderful was that it really helped them not just rethink their name and more exciting and dynamic visuals, but it also gave them a chance to really reflect on the fact that, in fact, admission wasn't the important thing. Their goal is to try to get more Texas students going into college. Texas has one of the lowest rates of students going on to college. And they realized, in fact, getting students into college was the easy part. It was actually graduating them. And they moved from being about admissions to being about college. And that really shifted as a result of that rethink of their brand, some of the programs that they realized they needed to offer. That it wasn't just about the time they were taking to get the students, helping them apply and getting the marks and understanding the complicated process of getting into college. It was also all those other important things, the soft skills, study skills, the challenges of sometimes being away from home for students who've never gone away, and this whole idea of college persistence. So it really helped them better define and better understand who they were, and then to be able to communicate that more effectively and to demonstrate it through all that they did. So the value of that introspection from them, I had said 600,000, they were 200,000 in 2006. And when they completed their books in 2010, they were a $1.8 million organization. And I just spoke with Lisa a couple of weeks ago, and they are now in the process of going national. So the value of introspection really helped them shift their thinking and shift their programs and be clearer about who they were, be able to define that value proposition. So when people knew that when they were engaged with College Forward, really what they were doing and how their volunteer difference could make a difference. And certainly with UNICEF, they've seen a 600% increase in their fundraising since they did their rebrand. And more importantly, they have really seen an increase in the number of a decline rather in the number of people in the third world, children dying needlessly. So discovering and defining, taking the time to really understand who you are and what you stand for is so important. So how do you then use this to really mobilize volunteers? And I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to whip through this a bit, but it really is, again, having that understanding so that people understand what it is. It's bigger than your programs. It's really the big idea that programs just feed into that big idea. Programs are the things that bring it to life and really drive the outcomes so that people understand how it's relevant to them, and then how they can be part of a like-minded community. And I think today that is even more important. People are looking to connect with people who share the same values, and everybody wants to make a difference. They truly feel that in the complicated world that we live in today, they want to take action and be involved in creating a shared future that really is more aligned with what they believe in and who they are. So when you take a look at one of our other case studies, which was the American Heart Association, and their rethink of their rebrand, where they moved from being more internally focused and very science and research oriented to being much more public facing, much more focused on on people and how American Heart Association could help people learn so they could live. And that has really shifted their thinking and also been an incredibly creative way of inviting people in. Now what I want to do is talk a little bit about how you can also use your brand when you clearly understand what it is you stand for, what it is you're trying to do. So obviously American Heart is about heart disease, but what their brand is all about is helping people learn so they can live. And when they did their brand work, they also recognized that they could look at doing some sub-brands so that they could segment their audience and speak to people in a way that was more relevant and invited them in a way that was going to be more relevant to them. So I think many of you know how brand actually should drive your programs and help you rethink what you stand for and how you do that. And so they realized that to generically speak about heart and heart disease, and even though they'd been doing some of this work, they really decided that they would segment their audience and build these sub-brands that would then help make those deeper connections, not just to donors, but also potential volunteers. And many of you have seen, I'm sure, the Go Red for Women program, which is in its 9th year of operation, and it has just truly transformed people's involvement in the American Heart Association and given them an understanding of how they can be involved in a way that's relevant to them, in a way that they can see makes a difference, in a way that helps connect them to a community of like-minded people who are all truly driving to make change. So certainly the Go Red for Women program has been very successful. The Power to End Strokes, which focuses in on African Americans and Hispanics who have a higher rate of heart disease, and gives them key messages that then they can spread in their community with their friends and family, so that as volunteers they can talk a bit more about what they're trying to achieve and obviously share those stories. So really what you're looking at is moving from marketing at people, giving them information, to connecting with them, making that values-based, making that emotional connection, being focused and clear and relevant, and really then trying to use it to build a community the way American Heart has, the way UNICEF has, the way College Forward has in terms of getting people involved around something that's meaningful for them. So understanding what your volunteers need, giving them a way to practically get involved, connecting them to the brand, then fostering those deeper relationships by giving them a chance to feel they're making a difference, and then obviously giving them the tools to be able to be brand champions, to talk about your organization and get other friends and colleagues and family involved in being champions and growing the community. So I just want to try to get to the next slide here. Here we go. Talk about one of our other case studies, which is a organization in Canada called the Stratford Shakespeare Festival. And this is a organization, it's a festival that was started in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours from any major urban center, and it's focused around Shakespeare. And it's hard to imagine that this organization has over 600,000 people who come every summer and fall to be part of the the Stratford experience. And when you think that you can see Shakespeare virtually anywhere, high schools, summer theater, etc., that this organization has not only got 600,000 people coming, but has actually built a global brand like things like the Metropolitan Opera. They actually do theater engagements where they show their Shakespeare plays. And what they really did was they started off by trying to not just be an organization, but to invite others to be part of that organization. And as the general manager says, we invite people to be part of us, and we aim to be part of them. And what they really did that was so unique was they recognized that just as a board of directors, just as a staff, they could never build the kind of organization that they really wanted to. And what they did was they set out to involve the whole community. It's a bit like Louisiana when they have their Mardi Gras where everybody gets involved. And the success of that festival is the success not just of the people who work there, but the whole community, all the volunteers, and everybody around it. So it really does start by engaging people, inviting people to be part of it, and giving them a sense of ownership and allowing them to be involved on their terms in a way that they understand how they're helping you achieve your goals. And what I wanted to do was talk a bit about one organization, if I can get to the next slide. Here we go. That was one of our breakthrough brands. And I think there isn't an organization, again, that hasn't heard of Susan G. Komen. And I want to talk a bit about some of their recent controversy and talk a bit about why that's been controversial and what it's done for the brand and how by falling away from their brand it has caused really great problems. But I want to start off by talking about positively how they have been such an incredible example of an organization that truly has built a movement. And we talked about calling the book about building a movement, but it's more than building a movement. It's really about creating owners and building a community of owners. And Komen is a great example of somebody who wasn't so concerned about their organization. They were really focused on that whole idea of the cure and empowering women and giving them a voice around the issue of breast cancer. They wanted to mobilize women and now all sorts of people in that whole idea of 20, 30 years ago when they started, you could not talk about breast and breast cancer. The only time you ever heard about it was in the confines of a doctor's office. And what they wanted to do was give women the power to talk about it, to understand it, to take control of their own health, and then to spread that word and to spread that information to other women so that they could truly address that issue of finding the cure and making a difference to the issue of breast cancer. And they have brilliantly mobilized people to join them, to be champions in their community, and to really give them a voice around that issue of breast cancer. And again, that idea of being bigger than the organization, of being really clear who you are, what the value is you're trying to drive. And then going back, Daisy, I'm just going to go back and again doing that sort of creative work when they understood what it was that they were trying to do. And they did their rebrand starting in early 2002. And it took them over 5 years to do their rebrand because inside there was so much confusion about what brand was and what it meant and what it could really do, and concern that it would actually detract from what they were doing, when in fact, of course, it's really clarified and helped them really power even stronger results than what they had before. And then they've also very creatively used that to try to segment their audience and speak to people in a way that was meaningful and relevant and gave, for example, volunteers a way to engage in something that was truly emotionally and a values-related connection. So again, this philosophy is trying to be a catalyst and a connector to help people connect to the brand, to the value, to the cause in a way that was relevant and meaningful. Not connect to the organization, but to that higher purpose and the outcomes an organization is truly trying to drive. So let's just briefly talk a bit about when good brands falter. And I think we've all heard some of the controversy that started around Kentucky Fried Chicken. If Susan G. Komen truly stands for the cure and talks about being for the cure, how does connecting with Kentucky Fried Chicken that certainly has a very high fat content and is not considered to be perhaps the healthiest of meals, how does that really help them drive that? And of course, one of the challenges was this was going to be their biggest cause marketing partnership ever. There was significant revenue to be made. They were not going to create greater awareness. This was very much a revenue focus. And I think it's really caused some challenges for them because they've lost sight of really what are they trying to do and be more driven by the money than by the cause and the higher purpose and the outcomes that they are truly trying to seek. And then, of course, their more recent issue around Planned Parenthood and cutting back and eliminating the grants. And again, it goes back to their brand stands for doing everything for the cure, finding the cure, helping women, empowering them. And so by changing that commitment, it really has so destroyed the brand and really, again, their community, because it's their community that has made them a success. Any organization will only be successful because you need a critical mass of people working for your organization to make a difference. So let's just quickly move on about your brand, creating that sense of purpose, driving direction, attracting higher, more best volunteers and best staff, changing perceptions, fostering innovation, and really such an important thing. And you'll be getting all of these slides so you can look at them more details, but really moving your thinking about what brand is to really this breakthrough thinking and how that can truly make a difference in terms of uniting you around that leadership position, standing out with that higher purpose, truly articulating and demonstrating your value, and at the end doing what we all want, which is driving that social change and impact. And I want to invite you to continue your learning journey. You can go to our book website, Breakthrough Nonprofit Branding. We have the first chapter of the book available that you can download. The cover page in Advancing Philanthropy is written by myself on Breakthrough Nonprofit Branding and gives you a chance to learn more about the College Forward case study. Again, a small organization that really saw incredible results by really focusing and using its brand to really drive change, and interviews with the authors. So, Casey, I want to pass it back to you, and thank you very much for your valuable time.
Awesome. Jocelyn, thank you so much for all the great information, the case studies, both large and small, and also making the connection to challenges that a lot of our listeners are dealing with, which is how to engage their audiences effectively in whatever their brand or cause might be. So we actually have had a ton of questions coming in, and I'd like to get to as many as we can so that we can continue this great conversation. So I'm going to jump right in and see how many we can get to, Jocelyn.
Great.
One of the first ones that came through is the problem, one of the biggest themes that you talked about was the power of focus, but making your brand something that is focused and tangible and in a way that your organization can have ownership over and can effectively communicate to your audiences what you stand for. Now, one question is, what if your organization focuses on multiple issues? What is the best way to start thinking about those, and how do you bring that power of focus when there are so many different things that you focus on?
Well, I would say there's a couple of things. I think you need to find a way that unifies all your issues. And I think one of the things that so many nonprofits, and I'm going to talk a bit about that what some of the nonprofits did is they really thought about what is their leadership position. And having the courage to say these programs really don't fit with what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. And I think it's such a challenge. There are so many problems, so many issues. So many nonprofits get mission drift because they're trying to make a difference in their community. Often they're also driven by financial opportunities that often will take them off of what they're trying to achieve in terms of their mission. So if you cannot find something that unifies everything you do, you need to really step back and say, how can we really be a life-changing force? How can we truly make a difference? And either, as I say, try to find that unifying story that brings everything together, that brings all of those programs under an umbrella, or you need to step back and say, we're doing some things that we shouldn't be doing.
So it comes back to, again, is what do you stand for as an organization? What is the one thing that you can do?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I have another interesting one, and I'm going to elaborate on a little bit. Does size matter? And I ask this because sometimes we have a huge grassroots reach, or an organization will have a huge grassroots reach and, have hundreds of thousands sometimes of supporters or people, but generally their brand awareness is extremely low. And at the same time, you might have organizations that have smaller reach to their different stakeholders, but have really strong brand awareness. So how do you does the size matter, and in what ways, what advice do you have for kind of striking a balance between those two factors?
That's such a great question, because I think so often, you look at, say, an organization like the Y or the YMCA where, again, or it's like UNICEF. Everybody knows UNICEF, but being well known isn't necessarily going to generate the support that you need. And UNICEF, when they did their research, actually discovered that when they compared themselves, while they were still, having fundraising coming in and they were continuing to see increased support, when they compared themselves to peer organizations, they in fact were leaving value on the table. And by being clearer on what they stood for and having the courage to not do some of the programs that they had been doing because it confused people around that brand, it drove greater results. So, if you've got lots of people, and sometimes the other question is that I would ask, how important is awareness? Sometimes it's very important. Sometimes, like for the cure, like the Komen for the cure, the awareness is so important. It's not about awareness about your organization. It's awareness about what you're trying to achieve and being seen as the leader on that. And I think without a doubt, people see Komen as the leader around the whole idea of for the cure. And so I think awareness is it's awareness with the right people. It's having a critical mass of people who, again, feel that connection to your organization. And I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it actually segues into another question I have. You're talking about engaging people, gaining awareness, and it's all sort of in this effort to kind of connect with your brand champions, was something that you talked about earlier. So creating those brand champions for your organization, that might include your volunteers, that might include your donors, that might include just your general audience who's going to help spread the word about whatever your issue or cause is. And so the question is, what is it that makes a good brand champion? What are kind of the characteristics that you look for, and what are some ways to recognize these people publicly?
Yes. Well, in terms of, the characteristics, I think what you're really trying to do is, it's like everything, and we talk about in the book kind of there's a spectrum of how you build the brand, and there's a spectrum of people who are engaged in your organization. So often at the base level, people are involved as volunteers because they're getting something out of it, whether it's, volunteering with friends or, being part of something that's fun. But as you kind of move up that spectrum, you're connecting with people's values and what they care about and what they're committed to. So the stronger you can make the commitment, the connection to their values and things that they truly care about, that they believe in, that they're committed, the deeper you're going to form that relationship. So the more you can understand what moves your volunteers and how you connect and how you can help them connect to something that they care about, the deeper your relationship will be. So then in terms of how do you recognize them? Was that the second part of the question, am I right?
Yes, correct.
So I think you try to recognize them by, there's just so many different ways, and part of it starts with finding out from them what would be meaningful to them. For some people, they're brand champions, and they're just proud to be able to do it, and they're happy to do it. Other people are looking for recognition. They want to be seen in the community as somebody who's really contributed to an organization. So I think you need to find out from them, and again, it's being donor-centric or volunteer-centric and really understanding what moves them. And then there's lots of little ways, of course, in terms of tweeting about them or doing a blog on them or showcasing them in the newsletter or inviting them to a special event that or an opportunity to meet some of the people that they're helping, you know, the people in, say, a social service agency. Certainly UNICEF has opportunities for some of their key volunteers and donors to actually go overseas and participate in some of their work overseas.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the great advice. We're just about out of time, so unfortunately I can't get to all of our questions, but Jocelyn has graciously offered to follow up with anybody's questions that are maybe more specific to their organization or ones that we just couldn't get to on the call today. So thank you, everyone, for all the great questions and comments to kind of continue the conversation. I just wanted to remind everyone on the line, if you enjoyed this session, I encourage you to also follow up and read our Engaging Volunteers blog. This blog is published on almost every day, and it gives great advice about how to engage your volunteers, a lot of the issues that are pertinent to you and your organization. It can be a really great resource to kind of continue your efforts as you try to focus your brand and engage more of your constituents. Also, you can follow us on Twitter. Aside from the @volunteer or VM_solutions handle, we also have an @VolunteerMatch handle, which tweets more about the nonprofit sector and sort of the issues related to you. And also, I encourage you to follow Jocelyn. She always is tweeting out great articles and stories that really helps us to get a more full view of what's going on. And finally, as many of you already know, we have a really robust learning center for our nonprofit users on our public website. So I encourage you to go to our website, volunteermatch.org, and visit the Learning Center, which has a ton of educational webinars, help videos, and other resources that will really help you take your efforts to the next level. I want to just thank everyone for listening in today. You guys have been a great audience, and Jocelyn, thank you so much again for sharing all your insights with us today. You have been a true inspiration to all of us and really helping us understand, you know, how we can make ourselves better. So thank you so much. And finally, I just wanted one more reminder is that we do have another webinar next week with branding agency BPN, which is going to be talking about effectively engaging employees, just in case anybody on the line is interested in that one as well. So again, read the blog, Engaging Volunteers, to stay up to date on upcoming sessions. And Jocelyn, thank you so much again.
Well, thank you. And as I say, I encourage people to go to the website and download some of the other information that hopefully will be helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and thanks to everyone on the line. Have a great day.
Thank you.